Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Respecting the Beer. My name is Gary Arndt. With me again are the usual suspects, the man who rolled dual-spec astronomer and brewer, Bobby Fleshman. We got the historian of hops, Joel Hermansen. And Charlie, I have to say, you have caused quite a fuss over at McFleshman's this week. So many people have been excited about this interview. Our very special guest this week is a man who several years ago, a College of Brewers got together and elected him, and they announced it to the world by white foam coming up the chimney of the Sistine Chapel. The Pope of Foam, Mr. Charlie Bamforth. Thanks for being on the show.
Nice to be with you. I wish I could be there in physically there with you as well, sharing a pint. But anyway, nice to be with you remotely.
We'll make that happen again. But before we kicked off this recording, we were reminiscing how you came here almost 4 years ago for a beer fest we were holding. You were the guest speaker before that. But yeah, we'll make that happen in person again if we can. Hopefully my wife, Allison, can pop in.
Excellent.
And so, Charlie, before we're going to go kind of organically through some stuff tonight. And I think people need to understand something about your background. We have a very casual, up to informed beer audience. So you started with Bass, if I'm not mistaken. You started before that as a microbiologist, I believe, or at least overlapping with that. And then you were quality at Bass, and then you worked with the Brewing Research Institute, making your way to UC Davis and becoming the endowed professor of brewing science there by Anheuser-Busch, if I'm not mistaken. You taught me in 2013 in the Master Brewers program. So I met you there. And then you made your way here. And then somewhere along the way, for that beer fest we had, and somewhere along the way, you got hired by Ken Grossman in Sierra Nevada to be their senior quality advisor. So I don't want to discount all the publications you have. It takes quite the thumb scroll just to go down the list. But you've touched on a lot of subjects. I brought you here today on the premise of talking about how one can incorporate beer into a healthy lifestyle. But I hope we get to meander through some of the other aspects of your career.
Yeah, we can meander as much as you like.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been in this business since 1978, which is probably longer than a lot of your listeners have even been on the planet. So yeah, but you got the history approximately correct. But
we have some soccer notes on the side. I don't have them on my right and left. We have some of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we were really glad that you were able to join us today, in light of the fact that your Wolves lost 3-0 to Newcastle.
Well, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, it was a bad day at the office, should we say? Yeah, they look bad. They look really bad today. It's not looking good this season. But who knows? As long as there's 3 other teams that are worse than us, then
there appear to be that right now. I think, isn't Ipswich the bottom of the...
No, Ipswich are just outside the relegation zone. Wolves are third from the bottom, and underneath are Leicester City and my brain's gone blank. So there are officially 2 or 3 teams that are potentially worse than Wolves, and the bottom 3 will go down. So okay. Southampton are right at the bottom. They're pretty awful.
Well, I'm going to be paying huge attention just to make sure you guys don't get relegated.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to do what I can.
Well, yeah, send good vibes our way, you know.
Yeah, you got it.
But they, in theory, at least they have the players. It's a case of bringing them all together. That's like anything in the world of brewing as well. It's bringing all the parts together to achieve a successful outcome.
Right.
So where do we jump in? Gary normally hosts. I'm the worst. Gary's the voice, and he keeps it rolling. You have such a diverse background in the context of beer. I think that, so Joel he has some great prompts for me here. He's a teacher by trade, and he left me with some prompts here, and some of which are highlighted. So I think we should ask the first one.
Right. Because Charlie, I'm just going to be honest for a second. I read your book this weekend.
Which one?
Right. The beer is proof that God loves us.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
Loved it. I've as an amateur brewer, I've been a huge fan of yours for many years. I told Bobby that as a Grateful Dead fan, this is me talking to you today is like me talking to Jerry Garcia. So this is kind of a big deal. So we made some notes just so that we could be prepared to speak with you. But one of the questions that I had is, we feel, I think Bobby and I share this thought, that you have the greatest job on the planet. And when we look through all of your writings and all of your books and all of the things that you've done, it's spectacular. And we're wondering how you've been so lucky and how you feel about that.
Yeah, I do feel lucky. I guess I was in the right place at the right time. There's never been a master plan in any of this. So joining the brewing industry it was the first job that took my eye when I would finish as a postdoc in Sheffield in the north of England, and just so happened to be at the Brewing Research Foundation. So give me a job, I can do that. So beer and enzymes as well, bringing the two together. And then, Bass took a shine to me, and so I went to Bass, and that gave me industrial experience. And it was back to the brewing, and they also gave me quality, a lot of quality experience. And it's back to the Brewing Industry Research Foundation, or BRF as it was called in those days. And then I was also, my very close friend is a guy called Graham Stewart, and he gave me the opportunity to be a visiting professor in Heriot-Watt in Edinburgh. And so when they wanted a brewing professor at UC Davis, they wanted somebody who'd been in the industry and actually had practical brewing experience. They wanted somebody who had a research record in brewing and somebody who'd been in academia. So I was pretty much the only guy on the planet who checked all the boxes. So I came to Davis in 1999, and 20 years later retired. And Ken Grossman said, "Hey, come up to Chico. I'll buy you lunch. I'll give you lunch." So I went up and I said, "What can I do for you, Ken?" He said, "Well, you're retiring." I said, "Yeah." He said, "No, you're not." He said, we'd like you to spend time with us, advising us on matters to do with quality." And he said, you'll have a simple brief. That is, tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. So we have that relationship, and I would not have done it for anybody else. I would have retired right off the bat. But Ken is a special guy, and
I can back that up. Having gone through the Master Brewers program with Charlie, his accolades, his praise for Ken Grossman, it's true. It rings true.
Yeah, he's the most impressive guy I ever met in all my 40 whatever number of years in the brewing industry, 47 years in the brewing industry. He's easily the most impressive person I've ever met. And so it's a real honor to be associated with Sierra Nevada these days. I'm not sure, Bobby, whether you were the year in the extension class when they had the bingo cards. Were you the bingo card year?
I don't recall that. No.
Yeah, I was lecturing one morning. I've been talking for about 20 minutes, and this guy put his hand up.
Never mind. Yes, I was.
I said, "You got a question?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "No." He said, "No, I'm not going to question it." He said, "Bingo," and he got a line. And everybody in the class had a bingo card, and there was something I said in every line. And I've been talking for about 20 minutes, and this guy had drawn a line through 4 of my statements, and I'm sure one of them was Ken Grossman. I'm sure it would have been, because
I think you used the word Mecca and Ken Grossman and Sierra Nevada all in the same paragraph, for sure. Yeah.
So anyway, it's an honor to be part of it. So back to your question, it's I'm very blessed. To be working on in a field that I enjoy very much, topic that of course so many people enjoy and relish in all sorts of ways. And get the opportunity to speak about it like today, and talk and to write about it and so on. It keeps me going, and long may it continue.
I think your success, I'm going to put words in your mouth. I think because you say yes so much, you seem to be out there in a good way. You seem to be promoting the science of beer, the quality of beer, and just the beer industry overall.
Well, it's so important. I do, and it's so important. And it's not easy, because if you're on the inside, and you're trying to spread the gospel about beer as a wholesome component of life. There are people out there that are out to get you in a way, and they're not prepared to listen sometimes. But luckily, those people who do respect beer and those people who are interested in beer, they do realize just how important it is to spread those positive messages about what is, for thousands and thousands of years been an important part of the civilized society. So, I relish the opportunity. Some years ago, my wife made me put the words at a poster by my office, in the office by my desk, which said no. And when people phone me up and said, "Hey, come and give us a talk," I was supposed to look at this and say no, but I don't think I ever did it. So I think I left that notice there for my success. I'm not sure whether he says no or not. I very seldom did.
I think we'll have time to come back to this later, but that was chapter 7 in your book. And I actually teach world history.
Right.
And I found a lot of intersections between your historical analysis of all of the forces that have acted against beer through the years, ranging from religious to social to economic forces. That really resonated with me. I thought that was excellent.
Yeah, I'm not sure who it was, so it's not that I'm paranoid, but it doesn't mean they're not out to get me, and it's very easy if you're not careful to realize or to believe that there are too many negative forces out there. And, in moderation, beer is a real force for good, in my opinion. One of the things I used to teach the students, I hope, and talk about very much was respecting the product. And I used to say, there's no place, and this is to the students at UC Davis, 40,000 students, there's no place for beer pong, I mean, beer is not something you, as part of the inherent feature of a sport or a game. You don't throw ping pong balls at it. You savor it, you enjoy it, you respect it, and you have it.
I feel like we should.
You have it as a wholesome part. But you have as a wholesome part of a lifestyle, but don't, it's things like, some of the things that people do. Perhaps it's no wonder that people have a down on beer and other forms of alcohol. But as long as beer is treated with respect and enjoyed and cherished for what it is, then long may it be allowed to thrive.
I recall you talking at some point during one of the lectures about the paradox of how the French drink so much wine, and yet they seem to be so healthy, and they eat so much cheese and so on and so on and so on. And you said that there's correlation, and can you expand? Can you remember that?
I can certainly remember it, and it's one of those things at the moment, as you probably are aware, and I'm sure you are aware. There's a bunch of reports been coming out and floating around recently that basically say there's no safe level of consuming alcohol. Well,
Absolutely.
That's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense, and it's coming at it from the totally wrong angle. But the point you were raising there was all to do with the so-called French paradox, and it all kicked off a number of years ago on a television program called 60 Minutes, and they were talking about this French paradox that. There's the French. You remember I'm English, so I'm inherently they're rude about the French are rude about the English and vice versa. So, and what I probably said on that day, Bobby, is the French live badly. They eat all this rubbish and all this cheese and so on, but their arteries should be caked solid with bad cholesterol. And on 60 Minutes, you said that it's because they drink red wine, and red wine cuts down the risk of atherosclerosis, blocking of the arteries, and basically they push something called resveratrol, which is in the grape skins. And because when you make red wine, there's more contact with the grape skins than with white wine, you get more resveratrol, and therefore red wine is healthier than white wine. Yeah, well, they don't say is, to get enough resveratrol, you've got to drink over 100 bottles of red wine every day. And it's not it's not the resveratrol, it's the alcohol. And there have been countless studies, whether it's wine, beer, any alcoholic beverage, in moderation, will cut down the risk of atherosclerosis. And yet people are trying to just say, it's rubbish. All those studies are wrong. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies. And they're just trying to sort of gainsay and say, no, it's just an old wives' tale, I think, was one of the terms used by the former chief medical officer for England. An old wives' tale. Well, they're just selecting the research they want to select. And if you look at that research, then, the stuff that points negative fingers, you can drive and you can drive a truck through it, And I'm not saying that if you consume alcohol to excess, it's not going to do you any harm. But, for as many headlines you could have about alcohol and negative aspects of it, you could write those articles about pretty much anything else that you put into your body, but they're picking on alcohol, and you've got to understand it for what it is. But again, back to the example you were talking about, that's the famous U-shaped curve that with moderate consumption of alcohol, you reduce the risk of dying, basically, from blocked arteries. If you drink too much, the curve swings the other way. But so there's a sweet spot. And this is what people are trying to deny at the moment. They say there's no sweet spot. Well, there's most certainly is a sweet spot, because there's a lot of evidence showing that the moderate consumption. And when you remember it, I think I'm right in saying the number one killer in this country is actually coronary heart disease. And if it's true, and I believe it is, that moderate consumption of alcohol cuts down those risks, then let's have a conversation about that in the press, because, it's a complex area, and I'm sure we'll get into it.
It seems like it's really confusing, too, as a consumer of information. One day that pendulum will swing one way, and they'll say what you just said, which is that when consumed with an appropriate, moderation, that beer is actually part of a healthy lifestyle. And then, a week later, there'll be another report, and then it'll, and it's hard for the consumer of information to keep track of where the current trends are. And in your book, you actually cited a really good example, and you related it to a crime.
Yeah.
And you said that, if somebody had committed a crime, they were wondering if alcohol was a component of the motivation behind the crime, as opposed to, well, did they eat that day? Did they do other things that very same day that may have also contributed to the crime? And we ignore all of those other mitigating factors.
Yeah, I mean, the causal relationships, you've got to understand a direct relationship between a factor and the impact of that factor. So, as I'm fond of saying, people say to me, look at wine drinkers. They're healthier than beer drinkers. And I said, how'd you make that out? And they said, well, yeah, you just got to look at them. And I said, well, jokingly, I will start and say, well, yeah, wine drinkers sort of jog and belong to health clubs. And beer drinkers watch ball games and eat burgers, It's not the alcohol, it's the lifestyle, So,
right.
So that is psyche tongue-in-cheek. But, there was a study years ago in Copenhagen, and they checked what people were buying in the supermarket. And what they did was they waited for people to come out the supermarket, and they asked them for the printout of what they'd been buying. And so they went through thousands of these printouts and picked out those who'd been buying wine and those who'd been buying beer. And those who'd been buying wine had been buying sort of lettuce and water and cress. People who were buying beer were buying red meat, burgers, cigarettes, potatoes, butter, So one of the beer that's keeping these guys alive, but seriously, it's a lifestyle thing. And there used to be an excellent guy, a fair-minded medic, let me just call him that, who was based at Kaiser Permanente a number of years ago. His name was Arthur Klatsky. And he published a paper, and he highlighted the fact that when people are drawing correlations, whether it's a positive correlation or a negative correlation, let's be fair, between how much they consume and the impact that their lifestyle and their health situation, it's on the basis of doctors saying, do you drink? And you say, yeah. Well, how much do you drink? Oh, I have a beer every day. Well, no, you have 2 or 3. Oh, I just have a glass of wine. Well, yeah, but what about the gin and tonic and the brandy, you know? And he said, basically, it's lying. And so one of those axes, you know, we draw a correlation between a health impact and alcohol consumption. That x-axis on alcohol consumption is, you know, often as not, declaration by people about what they're drinking. And they're lying, you know, there's no reliability on that axis either. Now, that works both ways, you know, it works whether it's a positive impact or a negative impact, but it's fraud. Human beings, you know, they don't just drink beer, you know, they eat different things and they do different things and they exercise to a different extent. So there's multiple factors that are involved in anybody's lifestyle and one's risk of ill health or one's risk of death. And you know, as somebody pointed out at the University of Cambridge, you know, there's no, when people are saying there's no safe level of drinking, well, there's no safe level of getting in a car, you know, there's no safe level of swimming, you know, because who knows what, you know, what other people are doing or what circumstances you're going to find yourself in. So, I mean, that's a slightly garbled response, but, you know, it's human beings do not live by beer alone. And if you look at the numbers that they're talking about there and the risk of death, I was reading one report only today that was highlighted today. And, you know, and a drink a day, you know, increases, you know, if somebody, 1 in 1,000 people are going to suffer from that. Well, what about the other 999, you know? I mean, even if it's 1 in 1,000, it's probably 1 in 10,000. You know, so I'll take my chances, you know. I won't abuse it. And I do think that if I, you know, was drinking 20 pints a day, I don't think it would do me much good. But I should not be expecting to be made to feel guilty because I enjoy a pint or two as part of a convivial lifestyle, you know, and I think it's going to benefit me. And if you let me just go on for one more minute, I'll tell you a story. My mother went into an old people's home and my brother took her to buy a new bed. And so she kept lying on these beds and stretching her hand out to the right. And my brother said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm trying to gauge the height for my brandy glass." And the last thing she did at night was to have a tot of brandy. And she died aged 102, you know. So if she'd been a firefighter or if she'd been a high wire trapeze artist, then chances are she probably wouldn't have made 102. But she did, and the brandy obviously didn't do that much harm, did it?
So where does that leave us in the context of dry January and this movement toward zero alcohol? My own opinion is we should moderate through the 12 months rather than binge. I don't want to say binge, but to completely shut completely off and then completely on at some point. I don't know what your opinion is of this.
My opinion is informed by another study that was reported some years ago about the benefits of moderate alcohol consumption. And the point was made that that's constant moderate consumption. So it's not sort of abstaining from, you know, Sunday to Friday and binge drinking the rest on a Saturday night. You know, that is binge drinking, and that's not healthy. So, you know, even if you're consuming moderately throughout the year, there's going to be no advantage unless you're trying to count calories from abstaining on throughout January, for example. Because if the benefits are due to a constant moderate consumption pattern for alcohol, then why jeopardize that by avoiding the alcohol throughout the month of January? So yeah, I agree. We're not talking about heavy consumption 11 months a year and then none at all in January or whatever month you prefer to choose. But I think that it probably stems from the fact that, you know, people sort of eat richly and dine well over the Christmas holiday period. And then as part of a sort of a overall detox, they behave moderately in January. And of course, well, alcohol gets picked on, particularly beer, because people say, "Oh, all that beer gives you a beer belly." Well, it's alcohol, and it doesn't matter whether it's beer or wine or spirits or whatever it is. That's the main source of calories. If it's simply a case of watching your calorie intake, personally, I would choose the benefits from moderate consumption of alcohol, and I'd cut down some other source of calories from my diet in January. I might even have a bacon-free January, but I won't.
Do you feel that the brewing industry has created their own problem when it comes to, let's say, zero alcohol January, or when it comes to looking back in time, seltzers and so on and so on? You've been involved in product development many times over. You understand how the marketing and so forth goes.
Yeah, yeah, I've got to be careful because all brewing companies are striving to continue to be successful. And if somebody is being very, very successful with a certain type of product, and it's very hard not to also go into that space. So it's a very difficult area. Speaking strictly personally, I believe brewers should brew beer. And when I think beer, I'm thinking malt, hops, yeast, and water. Now, long-standing adjuncts. I have no difficulty with the rice, corn, candy sugar, invert sugar. I have no difficulty with those things, but I do have difficulty with bizarre ingredients, and I do have difficulty with trying to, if you're not careful, squeeze out the tried and trusted beers with alcoholic liquids that have got a different provenance. Okay, so if it's the alternatives and the flavored alcoholic beverages, they can only eat into the beer volume. I'm protective of the beer volume. I think people should be drinking beer. I'm not a huge fan of drinking adulterated beers with bizarre bits of animals. Or I'm not so keen on, let's name, alcoholic teas and those sorts of things, because, there's only so much liquid that people can consume in moderation. How many times am I going to use that term? And if they're drinking an alcoholic seltzer, they're not drinking a beer. And I truly believe that the beer has stood the test of time. It's nutritious, it's interesting, and if you can't make an outstanding product range from, malt, hops, yeast, and water, then God help you. I mean, the wine guys seem to celebrate doing so much with just one basic ingredient. They only worry about grapes. They don't even worry about the damn yeast, and they have put themselves, and other people have put them on a pedestal for that. I think the world of the beer industry, I think they really do need to be celebrating what we have, I'm delighted, for example, that, the craft industry in the States has finally discovered something called lager, and that's just wonderful, I mean, go with it, there's plenty there to run with, So yeah, beer as a lot of people are suspicious and they don't understand it. And I think the brewing industry has got a lot to do to celebrate this wonderful product.
Charlie, thank you so much for those words. That is like my philosophy to a T. Our motto at McFleshman's is respecting the beer and beer flavored beer. And the gentleman sitting right here who does all of this, he does great beer. And I also want to add one thing about this dry January business. Your current boss makes it impossible for me to do dry January. Okay? Because Celebration Ale comes out.
Yeah.
And that is, I have stated this, and I know you're not that far away from me on this.
Yeah.
That is the best commercially available beer in the United States.
Across the United States. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
That is, when that thing comes out in late October-ish, early November. Like, I'm lurching around to different stores just to find it. It is glorious.
It is remarkable.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, but it's one of the number of glorious products that.
Sure.
But yeah, and my dear friend Terence Sullivan will be delighted to hear those words, and I'm sure Ken would too. It's an amazing product, and it celebrates, as the name would indicate, all that's good about beer. And of course, with the wonderful fresh hops and so on, it's just, it is, of course, a delight. And I've got one just down here in my refrigerator, and I'll be getting.
I was about to say, Charlie, I don't know if you need to grab one or if we're holding you from doing so.
I feel like that's a good time to take a quick break and come back and continue. Or...
Let's take a few minutes off and regroup for a second.
And that is going to wrap up this episode of Respecting the Beer. Make sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player so you never miss an episode, and join the Facebook group to get updates between the episodes, and support the show over on Patreon. Links to both of these are in the show notes. And until next time, please remember to respect the beer.